Hey guys, welcome back to my channel Books with Meena, or welcome if you're new here. And today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books of 2021. So it's the end of the year and everybody is making this video of like their best and worst of the previous year or this year 2021, and I'm making one video too, and there's really not much to say. So without further ado, let's jump right in with the list. So the books I'm going to be talking about, they're not in any particular order, as in like best to worst to best. There's nothing of that sort. This year I didn't really have any book where I was like, this is my number one favorite book. I'm going to be mentioning 5 favorite books and then some honorable mentions. Honestly, 2021 was the year of like 4-star reads, where there were a lot of books that could have made it to my like favorite books of the year list, but I just there was just something missing. And so obviously I read less number of books this year, so there are even less number of favorites in my list this year. Starting off with the first book, and this is Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis, and this one is YA contemporary. It reads a lot like a thriller and a mystery. There's almost like this solemn air of something bad is about to happen, something is going to get revealed. And honestly, this is through and through a contemporary. It's not a thriller, but the writing style is such, and I think that contributed to this just atmosphere of the book, because it does talk about rape culture and sexual assault and those kind of things. It's taking place in the small town where people they're like not as progressive, and there's a lot of like crime that has gone unnoticed, and people are not allowed to speak about it, or there hasn't been justice served for it. And I think I've mentioned this in my wrap up too, when I discussed this book in more detail. So if you want like more detailed reviews of any of these books, definitely check out my wrap ups or my individual reviews for some of these books. And I was just so confused reading this book. I was like, what are these characters doing? I don't understand. I disagree with so much happening in this book. But I think that's the point. It's this book is really not it's really unflinching, it's really gritty, it's reality for so many people. And the characters themselves, the main characters, are just so flawed. They do questionable things. You just like and so much happens in this book. The first like 50-60%, I was not sure like what is going to happen in this book. Almost every character, especially the main characters, because you see things from their point of view. They think that they are doing the best, and they are in their own right the people on the right side of the conflict. But then you see that how everyone is flawed and they have their own perceptions, and it's almost like a character study of these 3 teenagers who are just like growing up in a pretty toxic environment, and have to like grapple with some like really hard-hitting things happening to them and to the people whom they know in this town. But it's also just a character study of like people and communities in general, as to like how certain as to how certain prejudices and wrongdoings are held up and enabled, and nobody does anything about them. And this book was just amazing. Like, go read it. If you're someone who is not into reading books, you find it difficult to something that holds your attention, you find it hard to find a book like that, this book is one of those, definitely. Because regardless of whether you hate it or like it, or if you were very confused like me, it's still going to make you want to keep flipping the pages and wanting to know more about these characters. And I think these are the kind of books that really stick with you, because there is so much to think about and there is so much to disagree and agree on. So yes, one of my favorites of 2021. The second book is Milk Teeth by Amrita Mahale, and this one is, I would say, like historical fiction. It's taking place in 1997 in Bombay. So it's kind of on the verge of like historical fiction, literary fiction. You're following 2 main characters, Ira and Karthik, and they have been childhood best friends. They are now in their like late 20s, early 30s. And their families are kind of like trying to make them marry each other, since they have known each other for so long. But at the same time, their building which they live in, the apartment is the builder is like planning on tearing it down. And that's like one of the main topics of this book, is also the housing crisis and the redevelopment of Bombay as a city. Like, those are the 2 main topics. And this one again is a very character driven book. There's not a lot of plot here, and I would definitely say that this is not a perfect book, writing style wise, or the structure of story. Like, those things I think are not as well done. But that's just to show that, books are very subjective, and I ended up loving this book. Another book which just made me sit and think, and it stayed with me for such a long time because, Ira and Karthik felt like such real people. And like I said, this is a very character driven story, and definitely almost, I would say, a character study again of not only these two main characters but of Bombay itself, of how the different communities at that point of time in the late 1990s were interacting with each other, living beside each other, all the conflicts and the harmony, the diversity in such a big like metropolitan city of India. I think all of that was portrayed so well. The writing definitely transports you to Bombay in the 1990s and these characters who were living these lives at that point of time. Ira and Karthik themselves, I think, were such relatable characters to me, especially Ira. There were so many quotes in her chapters which felt I just they resonated with me so much. Like some of those quotes stayed with me for such a long time. I don't think there has ever been a book where I relate to the circumstances of these characters as much as I do the culture, the circumstances, the environment, the people, like just everything in this book. I think resonated and resonated with me, and also was like so relatable. And you would think that this book is just like a simple romance, contemporary or historical fiction, somewhat like that, like a light book to read, and it's pretty short too. It's not a long book, but it turned out to be so much more. It took me by surprise and was definitely worth the read. Has stuck with me for so long. Not a perfect book, but left such a huge impression on me. The third would be like a fantasy series, like a whole of the fantasy series. But I think one particular book that I fell in love with the most was Thick as Thieves by Megan Whalen Turner. So this one is a part of the Queen's Thieves series by the same author, of course. And this one has 6 books. I have read the first 5 ones, and this one is the 5th book, and by far my favorite. And these books are basically like a huge mishmash of like royalty, politics, war, thievery, because it's like the Queen's Thief series, and it's just so wonderfully written. Megan Whalen Turner is the queen of like subtle character work and also subtle plot building. A huge pet peeve of mine in a lot of books is when the characterization and the narrative style and even the like build up of the whole story feels very ham-fisted, and it feels like just not subtle at all. It's almost like the book doesn't trust the readers to like pick up on things themselves. And the Queen's Thief series does such a great job of just like putting things out there in the story and leaving it for the readers to figure out. So when things does catch up, when things do catch up with the reader, or when things did catch up with me at the end of the book, everything was like such a delightful surprise. And some things, when I saw them coming, I thought that was just so well done, and I was like filled with satisfaction of having read such a well crafted book where not only the plot and the thieving and the different like politicking, scheming, everything came together so well, but even the characters themselves were just such lively characters who like jumped off the page and had so much personality, so much going on in their lives. They were just such interesting characters, because I think especially with fantasy, where you have such a great opportunity of creating characters that are so eccentric, larger than life, just different characters. And I feel like authors at times don't really use that to the fullest extent, and Megan Whalen Turner just used that to the fullest extent, especially with the main character of the series, Eugenides. He is so eccentric, he is so larger than life. He's like one of my favorite characters in the book. And even some of the other characters who don't seem as as eccentric as Eugenides or as larger than life like him, like the 2 main characters in this book, which are Dammit and Costas, they are definitely like more subdued and have more internal turmoil, which is shown on the page. But I think again, like, these characters are just so well written. The world is it just feels very well thought out, and there's not much more I can say for this book apart from like, go read it. If you're someone who is new to fantasy and finds a lot of these books very intimidating, definitely pick up this this series, because these books are pretty short and they're easy to read. They're not excessively long. Each word, each sentence, each page counts towards something, and the author has really put in the work for making each word, each sentence, each page count. Each scene has like a meaning to it and is not left is not left unused. So yes, I have rambled on enough about this. So yes, one of my favorite series of the year and also of all time. I don't think I've had a huge amount of luck recently with fantasy series, especially YA fantasy or even adult fantasy for that matter. But this one was absolutely amazing. I gave each and every book in this series like above 4 stars. So yes. The fourth book on this list is The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and this one is very much like a Jane Austen novel except with like fantasy, and it's taking place in like this 17th 18th century France kingdom. It's like a fantasy world, and you're following 3 main characters. You have Valerie, you have Antonina and Hector, and they all play a part in the story and in each other's lives. And this book was just, it came to me at the right time. I was looking for something comforting and cozy. I was looking for like a good romance to read, but at the same time I also wanted a book which had like depth to it and some like larger theme that it would explore, and this book like served me on all of that very well. The writing is like absolutely beautiful and delectable. Like I want to like read more books by Sylvia Moreno Garcia based on her writing style in The Beautiful Ones. And look at that cover. It's like one of the prettiest covers I have read so far in the whole year. And like the cover is beautiful, but the book inside is as beautiful, if not more, than the cover. The romance in this book, despite having, its shortcomings and like there are some like lies and deceptions, I still fell for it. And I think that goes to show that the author, the book, did such a great job of like selling me on the romance and the characters, their chemistry. I wanted them to be together, and even just like all 3 of the characters individually, I think were such well written characters. So many of the interactions and the relationships, the personalities made a lot of sense. And if they didn't make a lot of sense, if you felt like if I felt like some characters in the beginning of the book felt maybe a little stereotypical or cliche, by the end of the book you are convinced that that's not the case, that each and every of these characters is paid equal amount of attention and is given equal amount of depth and complex backstories. I finished this book and went back and reread it because that is how much I loved it. I can definitely foresee myself like reading this every year whenever I need something like comforting and something that is predictable and just filled with romance and intrigue, and just like amazing characters. I just don't know what to say about this book because honestly I want like everyone to experience it like I did. I went into it knowing almost nothing, and then I was served so much. This book gave me so much and I truly like fell in love with it. The fifth and the last book on my favorites is going to be on disfigurement, disability, and making space. I think I keep forgetting the book's name, by Amanda Leduc, and this one is non-fiction. And this is the first year I think where I have gotten more into reading non-fiction, and this book was the first I read and definitely the best I have read so far this year, given that I haven't really read a lot of non-fiction anyways. But this one, I got this recommendation from Books and Lala. It is one of her favorite non-fiction books, and this one talks about basically people with disfigurement, disability, people who are neurodivergent or have mental illness, and how these other people are treated in media, especially fairy tales. And I think this book had so much insight into how we as a collective treat people who fall under these categories, and how also media treats these characters, and what kind of stories are told about these kind of characters who are born with disability or get disabled in the process of the story. Like I think all of that was just mind-blowing and done and written so well. The author Amanda Leduc obviously takes a lot from her own experience being a disabled person herself. She weaves in her own life journey and these fairy tales and representation in media seamlessly throughout this book, and it's just such a good book, like structurally and writing style wise too. I think the whole history of fairy tales and how different fairy tales have evolved and what that shows as to how society has progressed, and how the different viewpoints, just everything in this book was just done so well. I don't think there's a lot I can say apart from go read it. I definitely recommend this book. I do think it has a lot of new ideas. If not new ideas, they were definitely new to me, some of them. Plus, as a non-fiction book, I think this is very accessible because of its narrative style, where it is including a lot of characters and stories and arcs from different well-known mythological from different mythologies and fairy tales and like folk tales, that kind of stuff. So yes, one of the best non-fictions I have read this year. And that is it for this my favorite like top 5 books of 2021. But I would still like to mention some like honorable mentions. These were books that I definitely had a lot of fun with. They stood out to me, but just had like a little bit missing in them that could make them like an all-time favorite for me. So I have Stay Gold by Tobey McSmith, Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Booley, Parachutes by Kelly Yang, Charming as a Verb by Ben Phillip, Last Tank Standing by Lauren Ho, Crying in H-Mud by Michelle Zauner, To Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. And that is it for this video. Do let me know in the comments down below what your favorite books of 2021 were. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe if you wish to do so. And that is it. Goodbye.